A battalion is a military unit with 300 to 1,200 soldiers that usually consists of 2 to 7 companies and is typically commanded a lieutenant colonel, though this varies between different countries. The use of the term battalion varies by nationality and branch of service. For instance, some armies organize their infantry into battalions, but call battalion-sized cavalry units a regiment instead. The term was first used in Italian as battalion no later than the 1500s. It derived from the Italian word for battle, battaglia. The first use of battalion in English was in the 1580s, and the first use to mean part of a regiment is from 1708. Independent operations. A battalion may be the smallest military organization capable of independent operations, though this depends on the definition of independent operations. It must have a source of resupply to sustain operations for more than several days. In addition to comprising sufficient personnel and equipment to perform significant operations, as well as a limited self-contained administrative and logistics capability, the commander is provided with a full-time staff whose function is to coordinate current operations and plan future operations. A battalion's subordinate units are dependent upon the battalion headquarters for command, control, communications, and intelligence and the battalion's organic service and support structure to perform their mission. The battalion is usually part of a regiment, brigade, or group, depending on the organizational model used by that service. Homogeneity. The bulk of a battalion's companies will ordinarily be homogeneous with respect to type, although there are exceptions. A battalion includes a headquarters company and some sort of combat service support, typically organized within a combat support company. British Army. The term battalion is used in the infantry, Royal Electrical and Mechanical Engineers, and Intelligence Corps only. It was formerly used for a few units in the Royal Engineers, and was also used in the now-defunct Royal Army Ordnance Corps and Royal Pioneer Corps. Other corps usually use the term regiment instead. An infantry battalion is numbered ordinarily within its regiment. It normally has a headquarters company, support company, and 3 rifle companies. Each company is commanded by a major, the officer commanding, with a captain or senior lieutenant as second in command. The headquarters company contains signals, quartermaster, catering, intelligence, administration, pay, training, operations and medical elements. The support company usually contains anti-tank, machine gun, mortar, pioneer and reconnaissance platoons. Mechanized units usually have an attached light aid detachment of the Royal Electrical and Mechanical Engineers to perform field repairs on vehicles and equipment. A British battalion in theatre during World War II had around 845 men in it, and, as of 2012, a British battalion had around 650 soldiers. With successive rounds of cutbacks after the war, many infantry regiments were reduced to a single battalion. Important figures in a battalion headquarters include, commanding officer, second in command, adjutant, quartermaster, medical officer, administrative officer, padre, intelligence officer, signals officer, regimental sergeant major, regimental quartermaster sergeant. Battalions of other corps are given separate cardinal numbers within their corps. Battalion Group. A battalion group is a military unit based around a battalion. A typical battalion group consists of an infantry or armored battalion with subunits detached from other military units acting under the direct command of the battalion commander. Battalion groups may be permanent or temporary formations. Under modern military doctrine, battalion groups are being replaced by battalion groups. The key difference between battalion groups and battalion groups is that battalion groups consist of a mixture of subunits and typically do not include all subunits of any single battalion. The battalion staff includes the operations officer, who is also generally the next in command hierarchy after the battalion's second in command. Armored Infantry Battalion, headquarters of 5 FV-432, 2 Warrior MCRVs and 1 Warrior MAOV, 4 Armored Infantry Companies, headquarters of 2 Warriors, 1 FV-432 Ambulance, 2 Land Rovers, 1 8-ton truck, headquarters and sniper section, 3 platoons of 4 Warriors, platoon headquarters, 3 sections, LAD section of 1 Warrior MCRV, 1 Warrior 512 and 1 FV432. Maneuver Support Company, headquarters of 5 FV432s, 2 Warrior MCRVs and 1 Warrior MAOV, Anti-Tank Platoon, headquarters of 2 Warriors and 2 Milan teams, 3 sections of 1 FV103 Spartan 3 Warriors and 6 Milan teams. Reconnaissance Platoon, 3 sections of 4 Sabres. Headquarters ISTAR Group of 1 FV432, Mortar Platoon, platoon headquarters of 2 FV105 Sultans, 4 sections of 3 FV432s with L1681 on mortar, operations section of 4 MFC teams and 4 FV103 Spartans. CSS detachment of 1 FV432, Pioneer Platoon of 4 Warriors, platoon headquarters, 3 sections, LAD section of 1 FV432, 1 FV434 Carrier, maintenance, full tracked, and 1 FV106 Samson. This is all scheduled to change under the Army 2020 concept. Canadian Army. In the Canadian Forces, most battalions are reserve units of between 100 to 200 soldiers that include an operationally ready, field deployable component of approximately a half company apiece. The 9 regular force infantry battalions each contain 3 or 4 rifle companies and 1 or 2 support companies. Canadian battalions are generally commanded by lieutenant colonels, though smaller reserve battalions may be commanded by majors. Those regiments consisting of more than 1 battalion are, the Royal Canadian Regiment, Princess Patricia's Canadian Light Infantry, Royal 22 ERA Copyright Regiment, the Royal Newfoundland Regiment. Tactically, the Canadian Battalion forms the core of the infantry battle group, which also includes various supporting elements such as armor, artillery, combat engineers and combat service support. An infantry battle group will typically be commanded by the commander of the core infantry battalion around which it is formed and can range in size from 300 to 1,500 or more soldiers, depending on the nature of the mission assigned. Colombian Army. In the Colombian Army, a battalion usually has a strength of 1,200 to 1,300 men, and is divided in companies. Normally it is commanded by a lieutenant colonel or colonel. Counterinsurgency battalions are the exception, as they usually have around 300 soldiers, and are commanded by a major. 2 or more battalions form a brigade. Battalions are numbered ordinarily and according to its speciality: infantry, artillery, engineers, mechanized infantry, mountain infantry, counterinsurgency, military police, combat service support, infrastructure protection. Dutch Army. A mechanized infantry battalion usually consists of 1 command and medical company, 3 mechanized infantry companies, and 1 support company, which is 3 platoons with heavy mortars and 3 platoons with anti-tank missiles. With the Dutch artillery units, the equivalent of a battalion is called an afdeling. Combat companies consist of infantry, combat engineers, or tanks. In the latter case, the unit is called an escadron, which translates roughly to squadron. There are also support battalions in the Dutch Army, which specialize on specific tasks, for example, supplies and transport or communications. The Netherlands have 4 battalions that are permanently reserved for the United Nations, for the purpose of peacekeeping duties. An infantry battalion, logistical battalion, combat battalion, and the Royal Netherlands Marine Corps all have a battalion's structure. Each battalion usually consists of the following: battalion command, commander, second in command, general service, personnel section, intelligence section, operations section, materiel section, communication section, command company, command group, administration group, medical group, communication group, supply platoon. 3 infantry companies, support company, command group, recon platoon, mortar platoon, anti-tank platoon. Swiss Army. With the major reform of its armed forces in 2004, the Swiss Army abandoned the old regimental system and adopted a combat team approach centered on battalions as the building blocks of mission-oriented task forces. Battalion sizes vary between branches. For example, An infantry battalion has a nominal strength of 1,224 men. United States Army. In the United States Army, a battalion is a unit composed of a headquarters and two or more batteries, companies or troops. They are normally identified by ordinal numbers and normally have subordinate units that are identified by single letters. Battalions are tactical and administrative organizations with a limited capability to plan and conduct independent operations and are normally organic components of brigades, groups, or regiments. A U.S. Army battalion includes the battalion commander, executive officer, command sergeant major, headquarters staff, and usually 3 to 5 companies, with a total of 300 to 1,200 soldiers. A regiment consists of between 2 and 6 organic battalions, while a brigade consists of between 3 and 7 separate battalions. During the American Civil War, an infantry or cavalry battalion was an ad hoc grouping of companies from the parent regiment, except for certain regular infantry regiments, which were formally organized into 3 battalions of 6 companies each. After 1882, cavalry battalions were renamed squadrons and cavalry companies were renamed troops. Artillery battalions typically comprised 4 or more batteries, although this number fluctuated considerably. During World War II, most infantry regiments consisted of 3 battalions, with each battalion consisting of 3 rifle companies and a heavy weapons company. That is, rifle companies A, B, C along with heavy weapons company D were part of the 1st Battalion, rifle companies E, F, G, and heavy weapons company H constituted the 2nd Battalion, and rifle companies I, K, L, and heavy weapons company M were in the 3rd. There was no J company. The letter J was traditionally not used because in 18th and 19th centuries old-style type, the capital letters I and J looked alike, and were therefore easily confused with one another. It was common for a battalion to become temporarily attached to a different regiment. For example, during the confusion and high casualty rates of both the Normandy landings and the Battle of the Bulge, in order to bolster the strength of a depleted infantry regiment, companies and even battalions were moved around as necessary. From the 1960s through the early 1980s, a typical maneuver battalion had 5 companies, headquarters and headquarters company and A, B, and C companies, plus a combat support company, with a scout platoon, 4.2-inch heavy mortar platoon, along with other elements that varied between organizations. These included heavy anti-tank tow missile platoons, ground surveillance radar sections and man-portable anti-aircraft missile sections. Beginning in the early 1980s, some elements of the combat support companies were merged into the headquarters company with the staff and support elements, others were moved to their parent-type organization, and in infantry battalions the heavy anti-tank missile platoon was organized as a separate company. In the late 1980s, there was a 4th-line company added in most infantry and tank battalions. In this older structure, U.S. Army mechanized infantry battalions and tank battalions, for tactical purposes, cross-posted companies to each other, forming a battalion-sized task force. Starting in 2005–2006 with transformation, the U.S. Army mechanized and tank battalions were reorganized into combined arms battalions. Tank battalions and mechanized infantry battalions no longer exist. These new combined arms battalions are modular units, each consisting of a headquarters company, 2 mechanized infantry companies, 2 armor companies, and a forward support company attached from the battalion's parent brigade support battalion. This new structure eliminated the need to cross-post companies between battalions. Each combined arms battalion was organically composed of the requisite companies. At a higher level, each armored brigade is now composed of 3 CABs, an armored reconnaissance squadron, a fires battalion, a special troops battalion, and a brigade support battalion. United States Marine Corps. A United States Marine Corps battalion includes the battalion headquarters, consisting of the commanding officer, an executive officer, the sergeant major, and the executive staff. The battalion headquarters is supported by a headquarters and service company. A battalion usually contains 2 to 5 organic companies, with a total of 500 to 1,200 Marines in the battalion. A regiment consists of a regimental headquarters, a headquarters company, and 2 to 5 organic battalions. In the U.S. Marine Corps, the brigade designation is used only in Marine Expeditionary Brigade. An MEB is one of the standard Marine Air Ground Task Forces, is commanded by a brigadier general or major general, and consists of command element, a ground combat element, an aviation combat element, and a combat logistics element. In the U.S. Marine Corps, an infantry or rifle battalion typically consists of a headquarters and service company, 3 rifle, or line, companies and a weapons company. Weapons companies do not receive a letter designation. Marine infantry regiments use battalion and company designations as described above under World War II, with company letters D, H, and M not normally used but rather held in reserve for use in augmenting a 4th Rifle Company into each battalion as needed. United States Marine Corps infantry battalions are task organized into battalion landing teams as the ground combat element of a Marine Expeditionary Unit. A standard U.S. Marine infantry battalion is typically supported by an artillery battery and a platoon each of tanks, amphibious assault vehicles, light armored reconnaissance vehicles, reconnaissance marines, and combat engineers. The battalion's structure is designed to readily expand to include a 4th Rifle Company, if required, as described above under battalion organization. Often air-naval gunfire liaison company officers are assigned to the battalion, to coordinate naval gunfire support. United States Navy. The United States Navy has construction battalions and Navy cargo handling battalions, USSR, Soviet Armed Forces, Motorized Rifle Battalion. In the Soviet Armed Forces, a motorized rifle battalion could be mounted on either BTR armored personnel carriers or BMP infantry fighting vehicles, with the former being more numerous into the late 1980s. Both consisted of a battalion headquarters of 12 personnel and 3 motorized rifle companies of 110 personnel each, along with a number of combat support units, a mortar battery consisting of 8 120mm 120 PM43 mortars or automatic 82mm 2B9 Vasilks, an air defense platoon with 9 manpads, either the SA-7 Grail, SA-14 Gremlin or SA-16 Gimlet, and an automatic grenade launcher platoon with 6 30mm AGS-17 launchers. The BTR battalion also featured an anti-tank platoon with 4 AT-3 Saga or AT-4 Spigot launchers and 2 73mm SPG-9 recoilless guns. BTR units on high readiness status sometimes had 6 missile launchers and 3 recoilless guns. Both featured the same support units as well, with a signal platoon, supply platoon, repair workshop and medical aid station. The addition of the anti-tank platoon meant a BTR battalion at full strength was 525 personnel and 60 BTRs, including 3 command variants, while a BMP battalion consisted of 497 personnel and 45 BMPs, including 3 command variants. Tank battalion. Prior to the late 1980s, Soviet tank battalions consisted of 3 tank companies of 13 T-64, T-72 or T-80 tanks each, along with a battalion headquarters mounted in a command tank and a headquarters and service platoon, for a total of 165 personnel and 40 tanks. Battalions using the older T-54, T-55 or T-62's tanks had 31 or 40 additional enlisted personnel. However, forces in Eastern Europe began to standardize to a smaller formation with 135 personnel and 31 tanks total, with each tank company consisting of 10 tanks total. Artillery battalion. A Soviet artillery battalion in the late 1980s consisted of a battalion headquarters, a headquarters platoon, a maintenance and supply platoon and 3 firing batteries of 18 artillery pieces total, whether the self-propelled US-1 Gvozdy cars or the towed D-30 howitzers, and numbering 260 personnel or 240 personnel respectively. Rocket launcher artillery battalions consisted of a headquarters and headquarters platoon, a service battery and 3 firing batteries equipped with BM-21 Grads for a total of 255 personnel. See also, March Battalion, military organization, Swedish battalion of the 17th and 18th century, references. External links, French Infantry of the Napoleonic Wars, The Battalion Commander's Handbook, 1996, by Major General Richard A. Chilcoat, U.S. Army War College, Carlisle Barracks, Pennsylvania.